Hello and welcome to another session of Groundbreakers Live. I'm your host Javed Mohammed, and we're very honored to have with us Brian Vermeer, who is a developer advocate at Sync, and he's also presenting at DevNexus. Brian, welcome.
Hey, glad to be here. Amazing.
Likewise. So you have a session securing containers by breaking in. How did you come up with the idea for that presentation?
I totally get your question. I work for Sneak, and Sneak is a security tooling company.
Uh-huh.
And what we do is we try to create tooling for developers to make it easier. And one of the things is like when you create containers,
Hmm.
it's something you're not thinking of like how to do that in a secure way. We created the application, then you just put it in a container, and a lot of people think that from that point on, because it's another layer of abstraction, they're safe.
Hmm.
Um, if you're not doing it the right way or in a naive way, you are unfortunately not secure, and it can be even worse. So that's why I came up with that talk to um, give people that focus that when you containerize applications, you need to not only think of your application and to make sure that you're secure over there, that your application security is good. But if you are responsible for the container as well, because developer, you not only creating the application, but you're creating the container and you're handing that over, or actually maybe you even put that in production yourself. That's another layer of, well, business you have to take care of, basically. So given an explanation like some steps you can take to be better at that and not to get hacked or have a data leak, or basically um, yeah, get to know what you're doing and
Okay.
how you can fix certain things with some easy steps.
Okay. So when I think of containers, I think of Docker, and when I think of the management of that, I think of Kubernetes. So is there some kind of like a black hole that most people are not thinking about, or like so I'm just kind of curious.
Well, it's basically it's layered, so that
Uh-huh.
means that we used to think of only our application. Then we there was somewhere in the environment or somewhere in the universe there was an application server, and we just dropped our application over there. Now we have to think of the container itself
Hmm.
and the orchestration like Kubernetes or Terraform or whatever you're using to create your cluster of containers.
Hmm.
That's also a thing that basically you can make mistakes in, and that's what we want to prevent. So if you're building a container, you probably base that. If you're building a Docker container, let's make it specific, and you probably base that on something else, a base image or something that you pull from Docker Hub or whatever kind of container stuff you use. Um, but that's already there. There is code in there. There is an operating system in there. What kind of operating system is there? What kind of binaries are there in there? Are they Can they be harmful? Are there any known vulnerabilities in there? That's one step, and then is like deploying your application bluntly in a container without taking care of certain things. Then you might be running it as the root user, which may not be the best thing to do. So all these kinds of steps when building a single container. So that's what I'm going to talk about. When you orchestrate a single container, a single Docker file, basically, there
Hmm.
are a few steps to harden your security when you are responsible for both the application and the Docker file in that case.
Okay. And what kind of vulnerabilities are we talking about?
It are vulnerabilities on every level. That can be either somebody broke in. There was a vulnerability in, for instance, a binary on your operating system where that for some reason somebody breached on. Then you find out that security is a multi-layer thing,
Hmm.
because if somebody can penetrate in and you are running your application as the root user, then it's just a get out of jail for free card, and people can do anything. But if you, for instance, if you didn't run that application as the root user, still the attacker can do a bunch of things, but it's already restricted to a certain space.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. But it's also things like um, your application itself. can have things that you didn't think of because you're using certain libraries.
Hmm.
Because you're using certain libraries and you having a binary that is normally not called in your Docker container,
Hmm.
it might now be available because an attacker is able to do an arbitrary code execution or a code insertion, and then you get a snowball effect. So what for what can go wrong, and well, it depends on what the entry level is for or the entry point is for that specific attack.
Hmm.
But it can be harmful if you. It can be like a dominoes. Like you you uh, you pull in one thing and then it jumps over all over again. So
Hmm.
that is what I'm trying to demonstrate. Like we do all kind of small things so that in the end you will have a more secure environment.
Okay. And is there some kind of like a, I don't know, I'm just trying to think out loud here. Is there some kind of like a checklist? I mean, how do you know when you're secure? So say you go through the example that you share, and you take the measures to do that. How do is it, I mean, how do you validate that? Okay, now I'm good.
That's a very interesting question because there is no 100% secure
Uh-huh.
thing. But first you have to know, like, why am I doing this? What am I trying to prevent?
Hmm.
Because if you don't know that arbitrary code execution or SQL injection exists, you won't uh, you will not be able to defend yourself against it. So I will go from the point of the attacker, like, hey, think of this, think of that, and how can we solve this? So I will give a bunch of pointers that you can use to, and a bunch of examples that you can use to implement it in your own code, but also use it as a checklist, basically, for instance, code reviews within your team.
Hmm.
So it works on both sides, but you have to be aware that these things happen, or else you might not even think of these kind of actions.
Right. Well, Brian, it sounds like not only a very fascinating presentation, but a very important one. Just kind of bring it all together, and I know that there's a lot of detail there that we can't cover in this presentation. But if there's like one thing you want people to remember from this conversation, and to actually check out your presentation, like what's that one most central thing? Hey guys, like if there's one thing you do, either do this or don't do this. What would that be? And I know you can't just narrow it down to one, but I'm just saying pick one.
Oh, that's yeah. It's an interesting to actually pick one that is the most important thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, what I would say is be aware of what you pull into your environment that is not yours, because we take great pride in the code we actually write. We have a
Uh-huh.
lot of stuff in there, but on our application we think of, well, basically other libraries or frameworks we're using. And when you speak about containers that you pull your application in, then you're pulling things from registries as well. You're using a Linux distribution. Like, what are you actually using? Do you need that? And
Mm.
if you don't need that, throw it away, because it cannot harm you if it's not there. So that would be my main thing. Like, make it as small and as possible, so things that are there that you wasn't aware of
Mhm.
cannot harm you.
Okay then. Brian, as I said, thank you so much for sharing, and all the best with the presentation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.